All right, so we have short reviews for March 27th, 2024, and another 6 items. I wouldn't say that March was all that exciting around the edges. I don't think there was a ton of releases that were that interesting to talk about, nothing too revolutionary happening. But, these 6 are kind of reasonably interesting from the end of the month. And we get right to it with L'appel du vide. Metro is their debut full-length album. This is a Germany-based post-punk band that has influences from death rock and noise rock as well. They do have kind of a classic hardcore punk feeling to some of their sound. Obviously, that takes us pretty obvious direction in terms of influences. I would say that this is like a very anxious, meditative sort of post-punk album. Nothing too wildly, outrageous or out of the ordinary happening on it, but it's a good listen, plenty to enjoy as you run through it.
In den lichten Momenten, die es immer gab und immer geben wird, hab ich euch zugehört, trotzdem war ich taub.
German melodic black metal quartet Vorga. Basically, they return with a bigger, better album than their first one. I think this one does better in terms of conveying larger movements, bigger, more kind of epic feeling pieces, line up a little bit better with their themes in general. I think they've got some great parity going between their 2 albums in terms of production values, their aesthetic and all that. I think they've done a great job of curating this release. Maybe the songs are a little bit more memorable here because their shapes are better outlined, whereas the first record was a little bit more run-on. It was a little bit more involved with the intricacies of everything. This one provides just bigger, easier to read songs that are they're sort of in a modern form of melodic black metal, and I would say that probably their best release to date in terms of just sheer readability. I think initially their sound was a little bit more interested in the classic forms of melodic black metal. And now this is very much kind of a modern black metal band without going fully into post black metal. Although there's some of that modern atmospheric feeling to this record, but it serves this album well, and I think it was really well done. Obsidian Sun is a black metal side project from Netherlands-based artist Obscura. She's the vocalist and guitarist for Asagram. I suppose they suggest in the notes for this record that this was maybe influenced by German black metal, and I didn't really get the reference. What I found is this is a record that certainly sounds like an offshoot of Asagram in terms of its production values, the artist's writing style, and particularly their guitar work. I think that's kind of what leads this album naturally around. It's a decent record. I could see that there's sort of a knack here that is melodic and driven by lead guitars that is probably worth expanding into a full length at this point, and the production values are already stellar. So a lot of promise there in terms of the potential showpiece that is to come in the future. But this is sort of this is a taste. It's a teaser of what this sort of project is all about so far. Mutilation Barbecue is a Cleveland, Ohio-based brutal death metal band, and we could probably scale that back to just death metal. There's a lot of thrash and groove metal influences on this record. It sort of has kind of more of a mid-paced, brutal feeling to it. Not exactly an internal bleeding record, but it sort of makes sense that this band and 200 Stab Wounds kind of came from the same place. They were sort of in a kind of a death thrash group, Subtype 0 years ago, and now they've, this isn't half bad for what it is. I think that the simplified style of riffing and the beats here, they make a lot of sense in motion, and the gears are always turning, but I wouldn't say that it holds a candle to the brutal death metal that I grew up in the late 90s, where there was just a lot more to it in terms of not just putting out more notes, but just putting out more riffs in general. That's my perspective, but I could see why this is a cool thing. It does have that kind of old school, moshable, brutal death metal feel to it, while throwing in their own style and flair to it. So I could see why this would be an entertaining band.
Don't forget,
second full-length album from Seattle, Washington-based heavy power metal band Greyhawk is Thunderheart, and I think this one leans a little bit more towards the 80s, early 90s power metal side of things. There is still an epic heavy metal flavored feeling to it. This does feel a little bit like a Manowar record, and an early one at that. There are some moments that kind of hit that pre-Thundersteel feeling Riot sound. The album was a little bit overshadowed by Glyph, and that's a related project that has some members from other bands in it. If you're a fan of Visigoth and local band Skeletor, you'll kind of understand where this band is coming from in terms of just that 80s metal feeling, but not the soft 80s rock touch to it. So this is much more of a real power metal and heavy metal feeling record.
We walked in sunlight and fate's path. Honor, glory, like the heroes of the
Ka Entrance is the eighth full-length album from Furs. This is a long-running project from a Trondheim-based artist who is also known as Wo J. Reaper, and this particular project from him has always leaned towards a bit of psychedelic doom metal, sort of a retro heavy metal approach to classic black metal, and so that has led him down many different pathways of kind of lo-fi and aggressive, but also hypnotic first wave black metal. And that's basically what this is. There is sort of a punkish, sort of a metal punk feeling to some of these songs, but most of it is kind of his signature psychedelic doom meets early black metal sound. And I think that the personality of the band always shines through on these records. If you're a fan of a band like Faust Coven early on, and especially Barathrum, you'll appreciate what this band does. I would say check out some of their other releases for context and see how this fits in there. If you're not already a fan of this band, it can be kind of a strange thing to approach, and that's what I liked about it. That was what was compelling to me. So this is probably one of the high recommendations from this week's list.